Hello, and welcome to our podcast, Truth Be Told. I'm Sheddy.
And I'm Shabz.
We will be exploring the life events that inspire movies, including the paranormal, serial killers, and true crime stories. So, Shabz, how did you get into the genre?
I think it started with going to the mobile library when we picked up Stephen King books.
That was a long time ago.
I think I was 13. How old were you?
I don't want to think back that far.
By the way, this is not a Stephen King podcast. We're just big fans of Stephen King. Shout out to Stephen.
And I still remember to this day was Cujo by Stephen King. I read that when I was 9 years old. It seems a bit young to be reading a book like that.
That's very young.
I guess in them days we didn't have iPads and computer games as such, so we actually found interest in other means such as books. I've been into crime for a long part of my life.
We do enjoy watching true crime, don't we?
Definitely. I've watched a lot of CSI when I was younger, which isn't true crime. I've recently got into crime podcasts quite a lot, travelling back and forth to work. It's quite a distance, so it keeps me company on the way. I think that's one of the reasons that's inspired me to want to make my own podcasts.
Yeah, I listen to a lot of podcasts as well, but tends to be more on the realms of the paranormal rather than true crime.
Whereas I think I'm into my serial killers, to be honest.
I do enjoy serial killer documentaries as well, though.
That's good.
We are currently watching the O.J. Simpson documentary, which is along the same lines.
Yeah, we need to finish that, haven't we? I don't think there was any books. There may have been books written.
Oh,
about
actually,
it,
yeah, maybe there were.
but we are far into that. It's a fantastic documentary. If you've not seen it, it contains a lot of history behind parallel situations that were occurring at the time of the event that had a major influence on the actual case itself. It's not the first one we're going to talk about. I'm sure at some point in the future we will start talking about the O.J. Simpson podcast alongside many other famous cases and some not so famous cases, I would say.
Yeah, some more local to the UK as well, I think. I think a lot of the podcasts focus on crimes in America and not so much in the UK.
But I would say the main running theme would be to look at possible films that have actually been released that actually loosely are based around, or maybe not loosely based around, true life events.
We are hoping to focus on the movies that have a lot of evidence to suggest that they are based on true crimes rather than very loosely based on true crimes.
So here's a bit about the sort of thing that we are planning on covering in our podcasts. The first case we will be looking at is the story of Anneliese Michel. I don't think it's pronounced Michael, it probably is pronounced Michel. There's different examples online of how to say it, but we're going to go for the English version and call it Anneliese Michel. We apologise to anyone out there who's German
or French
who has the name Michael and pronounces it differently. So we apologise. However, we are looking at this story in episode 1. As we always say, there's a truth to be told behind the scenes. So come on, join us. Off we go. The story of Anneliese Michel.
Rosenkranz Monat, weißt du ja, ne?
Ja,
Rosenkranz.
aber die wenigste beten.
Die längste.
Ja. Und in der Kirche wird auch mal der wenigste Gebet, weil die Herr Pfarrer ja das für unmodern halten.
Ja.
Ja.
Alle?
Fast. Die sind ja so blöd, wenn sie eine Ahnung hätten. Ah!
Warum betest du die Rosenkranz?
Warum?
Ja, warum?
Weil
Ich liebe den Tag.
eine... Nein, ich sag's nicht.
Ich wird diese Rebellis.
Weil eine starke... Halsmaul! Ja!
Weil eine starke Waffe ist. Gegen Satan
Ja!
und alle Dämonen.
Ja, gegen uns. Ich muss dir sagen.
Der Rosenkranz eine gewaltige Macht, die den
Ja!
Satan und alle Dämonen.
Aber das glauben nicht viele. Die halten es hier nur volles Weiberzeug. Zum Glück.
Wer ist da schuld daran?
Ja.
Ihr.
Ja.
Ja. Das ist was Kostbares, der Rosenkranz. Kostbar. Rosenkranzmonat.
Das klingt verstellen nach nichts. Dem ist das Geld so schade für.
Der kostet ja was.
Bei dem schon.
Ja.
Gut Zeit oder auch Geld für.
Ach so. Viel Arbeit.
Ja, die Arbeit geht natürlich vor.
Aha.
Die Drecksau, die Bänge. Das kann ihnen noch ihr Glück sein. Aber das Ding, das gäbe Sachen, wenn die Drecksau, das haben die ihnen eingepflanzt.
Du meinst die heilige Kommunion?
Ja, ja.
Wollt ihr das nicht haben? Oder sind die Hände gut?
Das haben wir sehr gerne.
Sehr gerne.
Sehr sogar.
Ja.
Ja. Das müssen Sie der Drecksau aus Westbusch sagen, kapiert? Aber das vor allem im Auftrag von dir doch. Was frisst du das nicht?
Noch mehr.
Jetzt ihr Maul! Ja, die Kirschbank muss wieder rein! Scheißding.
Kirchenbank.
Ja.
Kommunion.
Ja! Einfacher die Mitte. So shit.
Noch mehr.
Die müsse als Priester erkennbar sein. Und zweimal, kapiert? Ja, die.
Noch mehr.
Ja.
Noch mehr.
Heiraten dürfen sie auch nicht. Im Auftrag von der. Ja!
Noch mehr sagen.
Und in die kirchlichen Dienst dürfen sie auch nicht mehr eintreten, wenn sie das gemacht haben.
Warum nicht?
Darum. Und es muss gebet werden. Warum? Und in den Kirchen. Und in den Familien.
Episode 1.
Anneliese Michel was born in Bavaria, Germany on September the 21st, 1952. Her parents were devout Catholics and she grew into a deeply religious person. At the age of 17 in 1969, Anneliese began suffering from unusual seizures happening during the night, which involved her body suddenly becoming rigid, the sensation of an enormous weight on her chest, paralysis, and the inability to speak. She was diagnosed with epilepsy at the psychiatric clinic in Würzburg, although an autopsy after her death, including microscopic study of the brain, did not show any changes or damage that could be responsible for the alleged epilepsy. She was then sent to a psychiatric hospital in Mittelberg, where she remained for about 1 year, and she suddenly began seeing demonic faces during her daily prayers. Suffering from what seemed to doctors to be major seizures, Anneliese returned to secondary school in the autumn of 1970, and in 1973 attended the University of Würzburg, where she studied elementary education. The stay at the psychiatric hospital did not improve Anneliese's health. Moreover, she began to suffer from depression. Basing her life on deep faith, Anneliese began to attribute her condition to demonic possession. She grew increasingly frustrated with the medication she was prescribed, as it did not affect what she perceived as her real problems. Long-term medical treatment proved unsuccessful. Her condition, including her depression, worsened with time. Anneliese would begin to hallucinate whilst praying and began to have an aversion to religious symbols. Demonic voices began following her, saying Anneliese will stew in hell. She mentioned the demons to the doctors only once, explaining that they had started to give her orders. Anneliese also began to see terrifying night visions, including demonic faces with horns on her walls. Anneliese was convinced that she was possessed by the devil. Anneliese's parents visited different pastors to request an exorcism. Their requests were rejected, and they were given recommendations that the now 20-year-old Anneliese should continue with medication and treatment. It was explained that the process by which the church proves a possession is strictly defined, and until all the criteria are met, a bishop cannot approve an exorcism. In 1974, after supervising Anneliese for some time, Pastor Ernest Alt requested a permit to perform the exorcism from the Bishop of Würzburg. The request was rejected, and a recommendation soon followed, saying that Anneliese should live even more of a religious lifestyle in order to find peace. The attacks, however, did not diminish, and her behaviour became more erratic. At her parents' house in Kleinenberg, she insulted, beat, and even began biting the other members of her family. She refused to eat because the demons would not allow it. Anneliese slept on the stone floor, ate spiders, flies, and coal, and even began drinking her own urine. She could be heard screaming throughout the house for hours whilst breaking crucifixes, destroying paintings of Jesus, and pulling apart rosaries. Anneliese began committing acts of self-mutilation at this time, and the act of tearing off her clothes and urinating on the floor became commonplace. The priest noted that Anneliese was possessed by 6 demons at this time. After making an exact verification of the possession in September 1975, the Bishop of Würzburg ordered the exorcism. He assigned Father Arnold Rentz and Pastor Ernest Alt with the order to perform the Great Exorcism on Anneliese Michel. The basis for this ritual was the Ritual Romanum, which was still at the time a valid canon law from the 17th century. From September 1975 until July 1976, 1 or 2 exorcism sessions were held each week. Anneliese's attacks were sometimes so strong that she would have to be held down by 3 men or even chained up. During this time, Anneliese found her life somewhat return to normal, as she could again go to school and take final examinations. The attacks, however, did not stop. In fact, she would more often find herself paralysed and falling unconscious than before. The exorcism continued over many months, always with the same prayers and incantations. For several weeks, Anneliese denied all food. Her knees ruptured due to the 600 genuflections she performed obsessively during the daily exorcism. Over 40 audio tapes recorded the process in order to preserve the details. The last day of the exorcism rite was on June 30th, 1976, and Anneliese was suffering at this point from pneumonia. She was also totally emaciated and running a high fever. Exhausted and unable to physically perform the genuflections herself, her parents stood in and helped carry her through the motions. "Beg for absolution" is the last statement Anneliese made to the exorcists. To her mother she said, "Mother, I'm afraid." Anna Michel recorded the death of her daughter on the following day, July 1st, 1976. The autopsy report stated the cause of death was malnutrition and dehydration due to being in a semi-starvation state for almost a year. Anneliese Michel weighed 30 kilograms, suffering broken knees due to continuous genuflections, and was unable to move without assistance. After an investigation, the state prosecutor maintained that Michel's death could have been prevented even 1 week before she died. In 1976, the state charged Michel's parents and priests Ernest Alt and Arnold Rentz with negligent homicide. During the case, Michel's body was exhumed and tapes were played to the court of the exorcisms over the 11 months which led to her death. Her parents were defended by Eric Schmitz-Leichner. Their lawyers were sponsored by the church. The state recommended that no involved parties be jailed. Instead, the recommended sentence for the priests was a fine. The prosecution concluded that the parents should be exempt from punishment as they had suffered enough, which is a criterion in German penal law. The trial started on 30th of March 1978 in the district court and drew intense interest. Before the court, doctors testified that Michel was not possessed, stating that this was a psychological effect because of her strict religious upbringing and her epilepsy. Before the court, doctors testified that Michel was not possessed, stating that this was a psychological effect because of her strict religious upbringing and her epilepsy. But the doctor, Richard Roth, who was asked for medical help by Alt, allegedly told her during the exorcism that there is no injection against the devil, Anneliese. Schmidt-Leichner said that the exorcism was legal and that the German constitution protected citizens in the unrestricted exercise of their religious beliefs. The defence played tapes recorded at the exorcism sessions, sometimes featuring what they claimed to be demons arguing, to assert their claim that Michel was possessed. Both priests said the demons identified themselves as Lucifer, Cain, Judas, Iscariot, Hitler and Nero, amongst others. They further said that she was finally freed because of the exorcism just before her death. The bishop said that he was not aware of her alarming health condition when he approved of the exorcism and did not testify. The accused were found guilty of manslaughter resulting from negligence and were sentenced to 6 months in jail, which was later suspended, and 3 years of probation. It was a far lighter sentence than anticipated, but it was more than requested by the prosecution, who had asked that the priest only be fined and that the parents can be found guilty but not punished.
Okay, so there you have it, the horrific case of Anneliese Michel. Just a little thing to put out there. This is our second time we're recording the feedback. We ended up messing up the first one. We didn't realise how difficult it was doing all the editing. And after spending absolutely ages doing all the editing, we realised that certain softwares only allow you to record for a certain time. So even though they were showing it was recording, it ended up clipping all our feedback. So it feels like a strange sense of deja vu at the moment because we're recording all over again.
And just so you know, the footage that we lost was absolutely amazing. It's a shame you'll never be able to hear it.
We didn't even think about backing it up. Well, actually, I did back it up, but I backed up the recording that had all the missing parts. So that's a fantastic start to the day. So we are actually on a different day now. Quite windy last night. I could hear bins rolling right down the street.
There's rubbish all over your garden as well.
Well, you've seen the news. It's 100-mile-an-hour wind, so I don't plan on going out in that today if I have to be honest with you.
So what did you make of the true life story of Anneliese then?
I think it was quite horrific, really. Looking at all the reports and the various newspaper clippings online, Anneliese, if you have seen pictures, we'll be sharing pictures on Facebook and Twitter we will give you them handles towards the end of this podcast. But the pictures are absolutely horrific. Her weight when she died was extremely low. I think you were telling me it was
4 stones. I think that's 38 pounds.
Yeah, so that's a massive loss of weight.
38 kilos, I think.
38 kilos, are you
Yeah.
guessing? I'm sure
we work in a different system in the UK, don't we? I was trying to make it more accessible to any abroad listeners. But
I'm sure someone will email us in. We're too lazy to check it up online, so I'm sure we'll get a contact on that.
I'm still used to stones, so anything else is a little bit difficult for me to convert.
I think I tend to stick with kilograms, to be honest. I find it easier working in a metric unit system, so often I'll have to, certainly centimetres and going into inches with part of the business that we do, it's very difficult to visualise that, so we have a tendency to use the online Google calculators, and this is not a shout out to Google, but we use Google calculators to change or convert when we do that.
But if Google do want to sponsor us, then that's fine as well.
I'm thinking you need to move away from the sponsorships. So, just as an afterthought on the possession or so-called possession of Anneliese Michel, it spawned quite a few films over time that that either are loosely based around the story of Anneliese Michel or actually follow it quite true to the point, I would say. The first one is Exorcism of Emily Rose. Now, Exorcism of Emily Rose was loosely based around the story of Anneliese Michel. There are some comparisons to the actual story. I don't want to really give a spoiler alert and go into detail in terms of that. Certainly if you haven't heard of the film and you're planning on watching it, I'm sure you can make your own judgment on the differences and the similarities when you do watch the film to the case we've actually read about today. However, Exorcism Emily Rose does go into the court case in a lot of detail in regards to whether the priests that were in charge of the ritual were negligent or not.
So it's The Exorcism of Emily Rose is the American version, isn't it? The more Hollywood mainstream version.
Yes, Hollywood mainstream version, but I would say it's extremely scary.
Oh, it's probably the scariest film I've seen.
I mean, I've watched. I'm a massive horror fan, horror and crime fan. As you know, we're doing this podcast, but in terms of horror, I've watched as scary as they come, and I'm not one that normally does get scared. But I would say I'd put Exorcism Emily Rose up there. Certainly, if you sat there watching it alone
in the dark.
It's very tense, and it does flick between Emily Rose, who is acting out Anneliese Michel, Emily Rose's story, and the actual court drama in between as well.
It splits it up nicely, doesn't it? It shows you kind of what's going on in Emily's life, and then it moves forward to the court case and shows what kind of was happening with the priests and the family after Emily in the film died. Yeah,
so that's enough on Emily Rose. The other film that actually follows on quite well from the actual story is a film called Requiem. That's a foreign film, but again, just look out for it if you want to have a look at that. But Requiem actually follows the film pretty much exactly to how we see the script for Anneliese Michel.
So am I right in thinking that Requiem doesn't focus so much on the court case, but actually on Emily's or Anneliese's life?
Yeah, it actually focuses mainly on Anneliese's life, her childhood growing up, and everything that happened that led up to the events that it did. Yeah.
Just kind of going back to The Exorcism of Emily Rose, I just thought the actress that portrayed Emily or Anneliese looked really similar to Anneliese Michel, didn't she?
She did, and if you do get a chance to watch The Exorcism of Emily Rose, you'll find that you'll recognise, if you're a big Dexter fan, you'll recognise Emily from Dexter. And after I'd watched the film, and I wasn't too familiar with the actress herself, we'll have to have a look at the name of the person acting out Emily, but I wasn't too, to be honest, I wasn't too familiar with her works before, but certainly watching Dexter after, and she plays Dexter's sister in the series, and I couldn't really take her seriously because I think I had a stigma attached to the role of exorcism. I mean, Emily Rose, and I always saw her in the horror role, but she has been in Dexter as well. So there's another one for you.
So that's a little bit different to the role she had in The Exorcism of Emily Rose, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely.
So her name was Jennifer Carpenter, if anyone's interested.
Hopefully that is correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so a bit of research there. Yeah, Jennifer Carpenter then is the character that portrays Emily Rose. Some of the things that happened with Anneliese Michel was she was seeing demonic faces on the walls. She was becoming quite depressed and refusing to eat. That contributes to the major weight loss that she had, as we discussed earlier. She spoke in Latin. We'll talk a bit about that as well, and different voices emanating from Anneliese at the time. They said she had superhuman strength, and at some point she was eating spiders and coal as well, which is it's not normal behaviour.
Quite erratic behaviour. She was also urinating on the floor in her house. But it'll be interesting to kind of cover what we're trying to do here really is just give both sides of the argument and try to see different viewpoints of whether Anneliese Michel was possessed or not. Obviously we're not professionals, this is just kind of our opinions.
So do you want me to focus partly on the religious side and then you want to focus on the medical side to
yeah,
it?
We'll do it like
should we do it like that? Okay. In regards to the religious side, if you go back to the time this actually happened, and this is coming from any family that actually has quite a religious upbringing, an orthodox religious upbringing, I would say, is you put a lot of your trust into the person who guides you. Certainly
like your priest.
Someone like your priest, or depending on the religion you're in, who would actually guide you. So if you are from a family where, as it appeared from Anneliese's story, so Anneliese was in quite a small, a close-knit family, I would say, certainly in the area itself as well, where I can imagine you would certainly take the advice of the priest who or the parish representative for your family and community. I mean, I presume you would go for medical help, but you certainly would ask for guidance.
Well, it was interesting because in the story, Anneliese's parents did approach the Catholic Church to perform an exorcism earlier on, but they said that she hadn't met the criteria. For example, I think at that time there weren't different voices, she wasn't speaking a different language, so they said to seek. So they did kind of realise the importance of her being on medication, but later on I think whilst the exorcism rituals were happening, they told her to stay off the medication.
Okay, that's interesting, because in my opinion, and purely as an opinion, if you were on medication, wouldn't that have made her more susceptible? If she was actually possessed, would that not have made her more susceptible to possession?
In what way?
In what way? Less control of her mindset with being under medication that is likely there to possibly relax her.
Yeah, I suppose at that time a lot of the sort of mental health medications were just about sedating people. So yeah, that would maybe affect how she was, lethargic and not eating and things like that.
And this was at the time where The Exorcist had just been released.
Yeah.
In cinema. There is some ideas out there, certainly some thoughts from people that it could have been a possibility that Anneliese had taken some ideas, I would say, from the actual film itself, and used that to appear to be more possessed, I would say.
I think with that theory, it wasn't intentional for Anneliese. Maybe it was like a self-fulfilling prophecy, so she believed she was possessed, so she took on the behaviours of a possessed person.
Okay.
I don't think she did it intentionally.
Okay. Let's just look at a few of the ideas then behind what we think here. So seeing demonic faces, depression and refusing to eat. We look at them first 2 points, I would say, first, together. Are they characteristics of medical conditions such as schizophrenia, would you say?
Yeah, definitely. Seeing demonic faces is kind of your classic hallucinations. A lot of people see the devil or demons when they have schizophrenia, especially if it's being untreated. I think the worrying thing really is the fact that she said the demons were telling her to do things. So in sort of psychiatric terms, you'd call those command hallucinations. And that's when it becomes quite serious, because if the demons are telling her to attack other people and she believes they're demons and she has to do what they say, that's when she becomes really dangerous, which, you know, for a family is really scary. And in terms of the depression, I suppose if you had a mental health illness such as schizophrenia and you weren't being treated for it and you thought you were demonically possessed, then that would affect your mood, wouldn't it, really? You're not going out, you're not seeing your friends, people are scared of you because they think you're possessed. I think she was in her own room a lot of the time as well.
I do think depression, if you look at society nowadays, there seems to be a much larger acceptance for it. At some point, certainly only a few years ago, in my experience, there's always been a stigma attached to mental health illness, or certainly depression, where people don't want to admit that they either need help. Some people have different ways of dealing with depression. Some are quite talkative, and I think that's quite important that people are open. It's certainly something when I'm teaching, I advertise this as, it's something not to be afraid of. It's quite common actually to have mental health illness. From what I read, they say 1 in 4 people suffer some form of mental health illness in their lifetime, and that actually doesn't take into account those who are elderly. From what I'm aware, they tend not to, elderly people tend to become more and more lonely if they haven't got a closer family. And it's not younger children either, because depression seems to occur a lot earlier in life, certainly when children, certainly in the UK, when they're coming towards hormonal changes towards their teenage years, and certainly towards such a pressurized exam period when they begin to move through to GCSE here. So
it's interesting because you said that I think there's always been a stigma with mental health, but especially in the 70s when Anneliese was around, I think to say that, oh, you were seeing the devil, you'd be shunned.
No,
wouldn't you?
I would imagine so, yeah.
Just going off what you were saying in terms of the age, schizophrenia has an onset of around adolescence as well, which was the age that Anneliese was when she first started getting these symptoms.
And I can also, am I right to say then that even though I have suggested that there was a stigma attached to depression or mental health illness at the time, little or next to nothing compared to now was known of it. So
No.
whether she'd been to the doctor and it was recognised as being a classic symptom of schizophrenia, it may not have been noticed as well.
Well, they did try her on antipsychotics, but my kind of opinion on that, it seems to be that her family didn't give it enough time to work. I think they expected to have the medication and then that was it. She wouldn't see anything, hear anything, and that she would be completely cured. But unfortunately, it doesn't work like that with antipsychotics. Even with the ones that we have now, you have to be titrated up to a therapeutic dose. So whether they gave enough time for that to work is something that we're not ever going to know, I think.
Okay, so let's just move on to the next 2 points then. So I probably actually split it up as 1 point first, but it said she spoke in Latin and different voices emanating from Anneliese. And I know we've had a discussion before about this, and there is some history or something that suggests that at the time Anneliese was being taught Latin in school. So
yeah, I think being from a Catholic background, knowing Latin at the time was a must. But you see this in lots of kind of possessions, don't you? This symptom seems to come up a lot with people speaking in different voices and like an animalistic voices. I mean, if you go back to the clip at the beginning of this podcast, it's quite scary, isn't it? You can't imagine a 17-year-old girl speaking like that. It's in The Exorcist as well, isn't it? So that's very similar to Reagan in the film.
in The Exorcist, there's parallel voices, aren't there? So different voices at different pitch that are going on at the same time, which is it's quite scary or unsettling, I would say.
I think in terms of mental health, that's a difficult one to give a theory to. I do believe, I think you mentioned there were monks that can speak in parallel voices in different kind of pitches.
I think so, yeah. I have heard about that a few times. I'm sure someone else will send out a message about that at some point as well.
But whether a 17-year-old girl who's never trained in anything to do with the vocals would be able to suddenly do that is another question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, I think that one stands out to me a lot in terms of demonic possession, because that's a difficult thing to do.
Okay. Is there actually audio recording of her doing that in multiple voices? Because the audio we heard, she does speak in the one pitch, actually. She doesn't speak in multiple
I've not come across it
Which is?
online, but that's what was said in the court case. So I guess that's another point, isn't it? A lot of things that were said by the priest and family, could be quite subjective.
One of the other things I would say is it suggested she had superhuman strength. Now, I think this could be purely based on perception. Because if you are... I think if you have it on your mindset that someone possessed, and you already know from your experiences of whether the media and possession, or what you know from reading various scriptures about possession and the strength that people have, you may have it in it can act almost like a placebo effect, I would think, where you automatically perceive the person to have more superhuman strength, where that person may just be far more aggressive and you don't see it as the norm. Or you're not... I mean, what do we deem as being superhuman strength? When we think of superhuman strength, we think of all sorts in terms of how strong someone could be, lifting cars, stuff like that. But superhuman strength, if someone is genuinely being aggressive, it's very, very difficult. And I know Anneliese was a lot younger, and I know she didn't have as much weight, but what did the people around her perceive as being superhuman strength? How was it actually measured?
Yeah, I suppose there was mention of like 3 people holding her down while the exorcism ritual was happening. But
I can imagine if someone's being very aggressive, it'll take more than 3 people to hold you down.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're thrashing about and you're trying to escape from people who... I assume, like, the exorcism ritual wasn't pleasant because her knees were broken from it, and
there was a word in the book that suggested that, and we needed to explain that at some point.
Genuflection. So I think there's specific poses, like praying poses, that you do. So Anneliese did them repeatedly, and she broke her knees because of it. So I think if you're in that much pain and you genuinely think that you're possessed by a demon, and then people are holding you down, you're going to fight, aren't you? You're not going to just lay there and kind of show no strength at all.
Okay, so the final point I'd like to mention is the eating of spiders and coal. Now, is that with schizophrenia, and I apologise because my medical knowledge isn't fantastic on this. Okay, so this final point over here with eating spiders and coal. Now, that isn't, in my opinion, normal behaviour.
No.
I can imagine there's something seriously wrong for you to be doing that. Could it have been a case that Anneliese was seeing other things, or purely would you suggest, or actually not even suggesting, do we think at that point she's under medication? There's a lot going on in her life. She's lost a lot of weight as well, that your mind start to automatically act erratically and do such things.
I think in terms of the eating spiders, if, like you suggested, if Anneliese was hallucinating, she may not realise there were spiders. In her mind's eye, she may be seeing something else. So when people are saying to her, "Why are you eating spiders?" she for her, that's not what she's doing. And I think the other kind of opinion that I have on that is that if she was demonically possessed, then it would be kind of fitting, I think, for the demons not to let her eat food, but to do kind of horrible acts like eating spiders too. I don't know. It's kind of something you put with demons, isn't it, really?
Mm-hmm. Now, I can imagine, though, I mean, I'm quite grumpy if I've not slept more than 6 hours. Really grumpy.
Yeah, you start speaking in different voices.
So, I can imagine Anneliese, someone that age, going through this level of problems, certainly with her, if she was schizophrenic, the medication she was on, the help, support, we have no idea the sort of things that her parents were telling her at the time, and she had this much trust as well with her priest and what the priest was saying at the time. With all this and the lack of sleep, I can imagine she was, anything was possible.
Delirious, yeah.
Yeah.
And that would explain eating the things like spiders. You're delirious.
Okay, I think we're going to wrap it up there today. In terms of feedback, I hope you enjoyed the first episode. We are looking into hopefully getting the second episode out quite quickly. We'll attempt to. We're hoping at some point to get it into weekly episodes, and certainly focus fortnightly if we can, in our busy schedule, since we both work as well.
Yeah. So just we're not really going to delve into what we do exactly in our profession, but I think you mentioned it, didn't you, that you teach. Just we want to kind of put a disclaimer out there that any of this advice, well, if it's advice, it's not intended as advice. We're just giving our opinion. I mean, I am from a mental health background, but these are purely our opinions. Don't take anything from it. If anyone has these symptoms,
definitely
go to the right places.
Definitely. Okay, so we'll wrap it up there, and we hope you've enjoyed listening to that. And always remember, there's a truth to be told
behind the scenes.
I'm Sheddy.
I'm Shabz.
Ciao for now.
Bye.